They told me I didn't exist. That's what the woman behind the immigration counter said. Her fingers froze mid-type, eyes narrowing at the screen like the error was a glitch. But it wasn't. I could tell by the way her face changed, slowly draining of expression, turning into something cold and rehearsed. She looked up at me, hesitant, like I might break if she said it too fast. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's no record of a Maria Aparecida dos Santos in our system." I laughed at first. A quiet, nervous laugh, the kind that escapes when your brain refuses to process what you just heard. I spelled my name again, slower this time. Even pulled out the wrinkled envelope I kept in my bag, the one my son had mailed me years ago, still addressed to Maria A. Santos. "That's me," I said, tapping my chest. "That's me. That's always been me." She didn't smile. She just looked at the screen again and repeated it, this time firmer. "There's no record of that name. Not under this date of birth, not under this address. Nothing, ma'am." I felt my knees weaken. My heart pounded in my ears. I leaned on the counter because the room started to spin. I begged her to check again, maybe under another spelling. Maybe the system had glitched. Maybe a letter was missing. I'd been here for 25 years. I had paperwork, a work permit, a tax ID. I cleaned houses, paid taxes, followed every rule they gave me. I obeyed, I worked, I survived. I had a son, a citizen. A boy I raised with calloused hands and sleepless nights. A boy I carried across the desert to this country when he was only 5 years old. A boy I gave everything to. The woman stepped away to get her supervisor. I stood there, clutching my handbag like it could somehow anchor me to reality. People in line behind me started to murmur. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't stop them. My name, my name, my name. I kept repeating it in my head like a prayer, because it was all I had. Because if I didn't exist, then who was I? The supervisor came, a man with a clipboard and kind eyes, but not kind enough to fix what had been done. "Ma'am," he said, "the system shows a recent update. It appears someone filed a legal name correction on your behalf 2 months ago." "On my behalf?" I asked, my voice hoarse, like it belonged to someone else. "Yes. The request was submitted by your emergency contact. It says here, correction of maternal surname to reflect accurate family ties." That's when I knew. Before he even said the name. Before I even saw it printed. "My son?" I whispered. He nodded. "Your file was updated by Mr. Daniel Santos. He submitted documentation indicating that your surname should be removed for consistency with official family records. That change was approved. Removed. My name was removed. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at the man like he'd read me my own death sentence. I didn't even notice when the envelope slipped from my fingers and hit the floor. I bent down to pick it up slowly, my fingers trembling as I looked at the address again. The neat cursive, his handwriting. "To my dearest Mai," it said. I used to keep that letter close. I used to sleep with it under my pillow on nights I missed him most. Now it felt like a knife. He didn't just erase my name. He erased me. He cut the tie that bound us. Not with words, not in anger, not in a fight, but silently, efficiently, like filing a form, like updating an email address. I tried to tell the officer it was a mistake. I begged him to let me speak with someone, anyone, that there had to be some way to reverse this, that I had been here, that I had worked, that I had raised that boy with everything I had, that I didn't just show up out of nowhere, but it didn't matter, not without proof. And the proof, the only proof that mattered, was gone, replaced with a legal update that made me vanish. What kind of son does that? What kind of mother ends up here, being told she never existed? They told me to come back with additional documents, but they said it gently, like someone handing you a shovel to dig your own grave. I left the office in a daze, my feet moving automatically through the hallway. I couldn't feel the ground beneath me. I couldn't even hear my own footsteps. Outside, the wind hit my face, and it felt sharp, like something was slicing me open. The streets of Patterson had never felt so unfamiliar. I'd walked those sidewalks for years, dragging vacuums, pushing carts full of cleaning supplies. I'd smiled at old ladies on porches, waved at store owners, given directions in broken English. But now, I was a ghost, a shadow with no record. And my son, my boy, My American boy was the one who handed me the eraser. I didn't go home right away. I wandered, sat on a park bench where he used to play. I remembered his little legs kicking up wood chips, his laughter echoing through the air, the way he used to run toward me like I was his entire world. What changed? Was it me? Was it this country? Was it shame? He always said he wanted to take care of the paperwork so I wouldn't have to worry. Said I was getting old and it was safer for me not to handle the legal stuff anymore. I believed him, because he was mine, because that's what mothers do. We believe, even when it hurts, even when it kills us. He told me once, when he was 19, that he wished I spoke better English. He said it in passing, like it didn't matter, but it stuck. And now I wonder, maybe I was never enough for him. Maybe I reminded him too much of where we came from. Maybe he wanted a new life so badly that he needed to cut the roots. And I was the root. I went back to my apartment late that night, the one where I still lived alone. He used to visit, used to drop off groceries or send money when he could, but it had been months since I saw him, and I didn't ask why. I didn't want to know, but now I did. I picked up the phone, hands shaking, and called him. It rang and rang and rang, then voicemail. Daniel, it's me, you're my. I went to the office today. They said you changed my name. They said I don't exist anymore. Please tell me that's not true. I hung up. No tears, just silence. You know, sometimes the deepest betrayals aren't screamed. They're signed. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been told you're too much or not enough, or if the people you loved most made you feel like a burden, I want to know. Have you ever felt erased by someone you raised? Tell me below. Type the words, "My story matters." Say it loud. Say it for yourself. Say it so others know they're not alone. Because this is just the beginning of what happened to me. And what came next, that changed everything. My name is Maria Aparecida dos Santos. Or at least, that's who I was before the system decided otherwise. Before my son decided otherwise. I still whisper it to myself sometimes. When I wake up. When I fall asleep. When I look in the mirror and try to remember who I used to be. Not because I forgot, but because I'm terrified that one day, if I stop saying it, the world will finish erasing me. I'm 68 years old, and I live in Paterson, New Jersey. Been here over 2 decades. Most days I work as a home aide for elderly women who remind me of what I might be someday, if I'm lucky enough to get that far. Other days, I clean houses, quietly, quickly, invisibly. I've learned to walk through rooms like a shadow. I make beds with hands that shake, not from age, but from the memories that won't leave me alone. People don't look at women like me. They look through us. I'm the kind of woman that blends into sidewalks, elevators, waiting rooms. The kind they assume doesn't speak English, doesn't know the laws, doesn't know her worth. But I know more than they think. I know how to stretch $1 to feed 2 mouths. I know what it's like to stand for 12 hours and go home to sleep on the floor. I know the taste of hunger that sits in your throat like guilt. I know how it feels to be watched like a threat, when all you want is a chance to belong. And I know the silence that follows when your own son chooses paperwork over you. Back when I first came to America, I lived in a shared room with 4 other women. None of us spoke the same language, but we understood each other in the way women who carry pain often do. We communicated through gestures, glances, sighs. We shared meals, stories, tears. We washed our uniforms in the sink and hung them on radiators overnight. We woke before the sun and walked blocks to catch buses that ran like veins through the city, carrying women like us to the homes of people who'd never remember our names. But I always remembered mine, always held on to it like a lifeline. Because that name, Maria Aparecida dos Santos, it carried everything I was, everything I'd survived, everything I gave. My son Daniel was the reason I endured all of it. He was only 5 when we crossed the border. He had hair like his father's, thick and wild, and eyes too old for his age, eyes that had already seen too much. I carried him for miles, sometimes on my back, sometimes in my arms, sometimes only in my heart when I thought we wouldn't make it. When we arrived in New Jersey, everything we owned fit into one black trash bag. We stayed with a friend of a cousin for a few weeks, then another, then another. I got work cleaning houses under the table, then later with a tax ID number I borrowed from a friend. I never asked questions. I never made noise. I just worked. Daniel learned English fast, faster than me. Within a year, he was translating for me at the grocery store, at the bank, even at the doctor. I'd look at him with such pride, my little man, navigating a country that still made me tremble. When he got older, I worked double shifts so he could go to a better school. I made his lunches at 4 a.m. I ironed his clothes while my feet swelled from standing. I sold my wedding ring to buy him a laptop. When he was accepted into college, I cried like it was my diploma. I remember thinking, he'll never forget what I did for him. But I was wrong. Over the years, the way he looked at me changed. At first it was subtle. A hesitation when I spoke Portuguese in public. A sigh when I asked him to help fill out forms. A shift in his voice when he introduced me to his friends. He called me Mom instead of Mun. He asked me not to talk much at his graduation. He told people I worked in hospitality instead of saying I was a cleaner. Still, I told myself it was nothing. Just a boy growing into a man. Just him trying to fit in. But the truth is, it was him pulling away, piece by piece, quietly. Until one day, I looked around and realized I was standing in a life I had built entirely around someone who no longer saw me in it. When he got his first real job, one with benefits, a suit, an office, I was so proud. I made feijoada and waited for him to come by after work. But he didn't. He texted instead. Rain check, Mom. Busy week. It became a pattern. Missed dinners, forgotten birthdays, quick visits, short calls. Then the paperwork began. At first, it was just little things. Let me help you with your renewal, he said. I can file it online for you. It's easier. He offered to handle my taxes, my ID renewal, my lease. Trust me, Mun, he said. It's all too complicated. I'll do it for you. And I did trust him. Of course I did. He was my son. He used to fall asleep in my lap while I braided his hair. He used to beg me not to leave for work when I worked night shifts. He used to cry when I got sick and bring me soup in plastic bowls. That boy wouldn't hurt me. But somewhere between boy and man, something shifted, and I didn't see it until it was too late. Maybe he started seeing me the way the world saw me. Inconvenient, outdated, disposable. Maybe he thought my presence, my foreignness, was a threat to his image. Or maybe he just didn't love me the way I loved him. That's the thought that keeps me up at night. That maybe I built my life on the foundation of a love that was never mutual. That while I was sacrificing everything, he was calculating how to remove me from the picture. I sit with that thought like a stone in my chest, and I wonder, how many other mothers are sitting in the same silence? How many of you gave your entire life to a child who now barely speaks to you? How many of you sacrificed your name, your language, your pride, only to be cast aside? Tell me. I want to know I'm not alone. Drop a comment below. Write, "They forgot who I was," or "My love was never seen." Your voice matters, your pain matters, and if you're still watching, thank you for listening to mine. There's more, so much more. And what happened next? It cut even deeper. I wasn't always invisible. Before America, before New Jersey, before Daniel even called me Mom in English, I was a girl in a forgotten town in the dry interior of Bahia, Brazil. The kind of town where time passed slower, but pain found ways to run ahead. We had one paved road, 3 churches, and too many secrets locked behind wooden doors. My mother's voice was the first thing I learned to fear. Not because it was loud, though it could be, but because of how quickly it turned silent. She would speak sharply one moment, then vanish into days of cold stares and slammed pots. Her eyes always looked past me. Like she was still somewhere else, maybe back in the home she left too young, or in the memory of the child she lost before me. I never knew. She never told me. Women like her didn't talk about sadness. They cooked it, scrubbed it, hid it inside themselves until it hardened. My father was the kind of man that townspeople respected during the day and avoided at night. He's a man of word, they used to say. Strict, but just. But I knew the truth. His word was law, and his hand was punishment. He believed discipline came through silence, orders, and when necessary, his belt. He'd drink cachaça from a chipped glass, And if the house wasn't quiet by the time the sun disappeared behind the sugarcane fields, someone paid the price. Usually my mother, sometimes me. We didn't have much. A small, crumbling house with 3 rooms, one of which belonged to my father's rules. The others were for sleeping and surviving. My job, as the oldest daughter, was to wake before dawn, light the wood stove, and boil water for coffee that smelled like burnt soil. I'd wash our clothes with soap made from leftover grease and hang them beside chickens that clucked like they understood shame. I learned young to move without making noise, to listen between the words, to swallow fear like stale bread. When I was 12, my uncle gave me a doll, one he found at a fair, missing one eye and dressed in fabric stained with rain. I loved her like she was alive, named her Anna, and whispered to her in the dark. She was the first thing I ever loved without conditions. And one night, when I forgot her on the kitchen table, my father found her and tossed her into the fire. He said, "Girls who played with nonsense stayed girls forever." I watched her melt into flames, the smell of burning plastic crawling up my nose. That was the night I stopped being a child. At 14, I started working in other people's homes, cooking, cleaning, watching babies. I was always polite, always grateful, even when they paid me in leftover food or dresses their daughters no longer wanted. One woman, Donna Isadora, told me I had a silent nature. She said it like a compliment. I still hear her voice when I fold towels a certain way or organize silverware without thinking. It's funny, the things we carry without meaning to. By 16, I'd been promised to a man 12 years older. My father arranged it over a conversation I wasn't invited to. He had a house, no children, and a reputation for working hard. That was enough. My mother didn't speak to me that week, not out of protest, but because she didn't know how to say goodbye to something she never got to be herself, a daughter, free. The man's name was Luciano. He wasn't cruel like my father, but he wasn't warm either. We shared a roof, not a life. He expected meals hot and his laundry folded. He didn't hit me, but he didn't notice me either. When I got pregnant with Daniel, it wasn't planned. It wasn't romantic. It was just what happened when 2 people shared a bed out of obligation, not love. But the moment I felt Daniel move inside me, something in me broke open. Something I didn't know existed. Love. Not the kind you read in stories or hear in love songs, but the raw, instinctual kind that makes you willing to burn your own body just to keep someone else warm. From the second he was born, eyes closed, mouth wide open to the world, I knew I would protect him with everything I had. He was mine, my reason, my revolution. Luciano didn't stick around. He died in an accident when Daniel was 4, fell from scaffolding at a construction site, and was buried 2 days later in a coffin borrowed by the local church. No life insurance, no savings, just debts and silence. That's when I started thinking about leaving. Brazil didn't want women like me to dream. It wanted us to endure, to serve, to die quietly. But I wanted more, not for me, for him. I started asking around, listened closely in market lines, collected stories from cousins who knew someone who crossed, who made it, who sent money back. I didn't know what a visa was. I didn't understand borders. I just knew there was a place where mothers like me washed dishes and cleaned floors, and their children became someone, and I wanted my son to be someone. It took months to gather what I needed. Sold my sewing machine, took a loan from a neighbor, packed only what could fit in a small nylon bag, mostly clothes for Daniel and a photograph of my mother holding him as a baby, the only time I saw her smile at him. We crossed at night, in silence, through dry land that cracked under our feet like it was warning us to turn back. Daniel didn't cry, not once. He held my hand the entire time. We hid in trucks, crammed into spaces not meant for human beings. One night, we were caught in the desert. A coyote abandoned us when he heard patrols nearby. We huddled beneath a tarp, and I wrapped my body around Daniel like a shell. My body burned with fever. My lips cracked open from thirst. I prayed not to be saved, but to live just one more day, to carry him a little further. Eventually, someone helped. A family. I never got their names. Just remembered the mother giving me water from her own bottle, pressing her hand to my forehead, whispering, "You'll make it." And somehow, We did. New Jersey was loud, cold, and unwelcoming at first. I didn't speak the language. I didn't understand the rules. But I understood survival. I understood how to disappear into labor, how to say yes to every job, how to clean corners no one else would touch. I sent Daniel to school and watched him grow. I kept our story tucked away, never told him the full truth. I didn't want him to carry the weight of the journey. I wanted him to fly without knowing how heavy my wings had been. But maybe that was the mistake. Maybe in protecting him from the truth, I gave him permission to forget it. Now I sit here, 68 years old, erased from the system, erased by the very boy I crossed countries for, and I wonder, do any of you know what that feels like? To have given your blood, your bones, your breath for someone, only for them to rewrite you out of their story. If you've ever been that mother, that aunt, that grandmother, if your silence was mistaken for weakness, I want to hear from you. Write in the comments. I carried them and they forgot, because you deserve to be remembered. And this story, it's only just beginning. Raising Daniel was never a duty. It was a promise, a fire that kept me alive through the longest nights. I didn't raise him to be grateful. I raised him to be free, to belong in a country that never truly wanted me, to walk where I couldn't, to speak without fear, to eat without guilt. I gave him everything, hoping it would be enough. In our first apartment, if you could call it that, we had a mattress on the floor and a space heater that worked only when it wanted to. The walls were thin, and so was the soup most nights. But I never let Daniel see me cry. Not when the landlord yelled because I was late with rent. Not when my hands cracked from bleach and cold. Not when I came home dizzy from hunger because I skipped lunch to buy him a better pair of sneakers. I used to watch him sleep, his little chest rising and falling like a miracle, his eyelashes twitching in dreams I prayed would be better than the life I could give him. I'd press my lips to his forehead and whisper promises I wasn't sure I could keep. You'll have more than I ever did. You'll never be ashamed of where you came from. And for a long time, it felt like those promises meant something. He was a bright kid, curious, soft-spoken, loved to read. He'd bring home picture books from school and sit in my lap as I pretended to understand the English words. He would trace the letters with his tiny fingers and teach me. "It's a dog, mun," he'd say, and I'd repeat it like a child, laughing when I got it wrong. He was patient with me back then. He used to ask about Brazil, about my childhood. I told him little pieces, left out the ugly parts. Told him about the mango trees, the river where I learned to swim, the music in the streets during festas. He used to say he wanted to visit one day, said he wanted to know where I came from. But as he got older, those questions stopped. The first time I noticed the shift, he was around 12. I picked him up from school and said something to him in Portuguese while walking past a group of his classmates. He looked at me, embarrassed, and whispered, "Don't speak that here." I stopped walking. It felt like a slap, but I laughed it off, told myself it was just puberty. Kids say things they don't mean, they get shy, they want to fit in. I told myself that because it hurt too much to believe the other possibility. From then on, the little things started piling up. He asked me not to come to his school events anymore, said he'd get nervous if I was there, said it would be easier if he just went with friends. When I insisted once, he told me I dressed too old-fashioned, that I'd make him stand out. I remember staring at myself in the mirror that day, holding the one dress I saved for special occasions, a pale blue one I bought at a secondhand shop with the last tip I got from a client. I folded it and put it back in the drawer. I never wore it again. He started correcting my English more often. First, gently, then with sighs, then with impatience. "No, Mai, you don't say it like that. Just let me talk, okay?" I'd nod and let him speak. I stopped asking questions. I stopped trying. He stopped calling me Mun at home. Switched to Mom. Then just Ma. Then, mostly silence. When he got accepted to college, on a full scholarship, I thought, this is it. This is the beginning of his new life, the one I fought for. I cooked all his favorite dishes that week: feijoada, moqueca, brigadeiros. I wrapped them in containers and labeled each one in English with shaky handwriting so his new roommates could understand. I kissed his forehead the morning he left and slipped a little medal of Our Lady of Aparecida into his bag. He didn't look back when he walked into the dorm. Not once. I cried the entire train ride home, but I was proud, still proud, because he was doing what I couldn't, becoming someone, becoming American. I told myself the distance was normal, that boys grow up, that they come back eventually. I called him every Sunday, even when he only answered every third. I sent money every month, even when he insisted he was fine. I sent winter coats when the forecast showed snow, sent vitamin C packets and healing oils when the flu hit. I never stopped being his mother, even when he started treating me like a stranger. After college, he moved into a shared apartment in Manhattan, visited once every couple of months, texted more than he called, then less, then not at all. I followed him on social media just to see his face, liked his photos, left little comments in Portuguese. He never replied. I noticed he hid them later. Then came the woman, a girl with soft eyes, American-born, always smiling in his photos. They traveled together, went to wine tastings, pumpkin patches, dinners at places where the menus didn't list prices. In one post, someone asked, "Is that your mom in the background?" And he replied, "Nah, just some lady." It was me. I was in the background, standing behind him at the street fair we went to once. He cropped me out in the next version he posted. And yet, even then, I forgave him. Because that's what we do, right? We forgive the sons we carried when they forget the weight of our wombs. We forgive the silence, the shame, the distance. We forgive them until we don't know who we are without the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'll remember. He came by last year with a folder of documents, said he wanted to help organize things, that it would be better if he handled all my affairs, bank, housing, health, that it was too risky for someone like me to keep making mistakes. Like me, he said. I didn't know what he meant, but I signed everything he gave me because I trusted him, because I wanted to believe I was still his mother, not a liability. Now I know those papers were the first cuts, the ones that slowly severed me from the life I built with my own hands. But back then, I still cooked for him when he visited, still asked if he needed money, still waited by the window on holidays, hoping he'd stop by unannounced like he used to. He didn't. And still, I waited. I want to ask you, whoever is still listening to this, have you ever loved someone so deeply that you stopped noticing how little they gave in return? Have you ever mistaken distance for independence? Silence for maturity? Have you ever disappeared yourself just to stay in their life? Please, if this feels like your story too, write in the comments. I stayed for them, but they left anyway. Or just say, I know this feeling. You have no idea how many others are reading and realizing they're not alone. What happened next? It only confirmed what my heart had been trying to deny for years. And I'll tell you, all of it. The signs were always there. Small ones at first. Whispers in the silence. Glances that lingered too long on paperwork I didn't understand. His phone calls cut short when I asked too many questions. The nervous smile he gave me when I talked about renewing my documents, like it was a conversation he didn't want to be part of, but I ignored it. Like I ignored everything else he did that made my heart sink a little. You tell yourself it's nothing, that you're just imagining it, that your mind is too tired, your heart too full. But deep down, you know, you always know. It started with the healthcare forms. He told me he wanted to help me apply for better coverage, said I was getting older, that it was dangerous to keep delaying doctor visits. He sat me down one Sunday afternoon with a stack of papers, some typed, some handwritten. He placed a pen in my hand and smiled. Just sign here, Mon. I'll take care of everything. The way he said it, so calm, so practiced. I felt a flicker of doubt, but I wanted to believe him. I needed to. Because if I couldn't trust him, my son, my only family in this country, then who could I trust? I didn't read the papers. I barely glanced at them. The English was too technical, the sentences too long, the words blurring together like a language not meant for me. I saw my name printed at the top, Maria Aparecida dos Santos, and that was enough. That was my anchor, my reassurance. He tapped his finger on the line. I signed, then another. I signed again. Don't worry, I've got you, he said, patting my hand. Those words used to comfort me, but that day they felt different, like something was slipping between us, something I couldn't quite grasp. After that, things changed. Not all at once, but gradually, quietly. He stopped visiting altogether, said work was too busy, said he'd call instead, but he didn't, not unless he needed something. A piece of mail forwarded, a copy of a utility bill, a favor I couldn't question. When I asked about the health forms, he shrugged, said they were still in process. When I asked about my tax return, he said he filed it, that it wasn't something I needed to worry about anymore. That phrase, "You don't need to worry about it," it became his favorite, and I started to feel like a guest in my own life. One day, I tried to renew my bus pass, a simple thing, something I'd done every year without issue. But the man behind the counter said the system showed a different name, a shorter one. No maternal surname. I laughed. "That's wrong. That's not my name." He double-checked. "This is what we have. No middle or maiden name listed, just your first and last, Daniel's last name." My stomach turned. I went home and pulled out every paper I could find, old bills, receipts, a copy of my tax return from 2 years ago. They all said the same thing, Maria Aparecida dos Santos. That was my name, my full name, the one my mother gave me, the one I carried across borders. I called Daniel that night, left a voicemail. "Hey, honey, I think there's been some kind of mistake with my name. Can you check?" He didn't call back. Weeks passed. Then the phone rang one evening. It was him. I rushed to pick up. "Oi, filho, I was worried." "Yeah, sorry. Things have been crazy. I think someone changed my name in some of the systems. It's not showing up right." Long pause. "It's just for simplicity, Mun," he said. "It was causing issues with some of your paperwork. The shorter name helps avoid delays. It's still you." "Still me? How could it still be me if the name wasn't mine?" "I don't understand, Daniel. You changed my documents?" No, just updated them, cleaned them up. It's easier this way." Did I sign something?" "My," he said, annoyed now. "You don't need to worry. Trust me." That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone still in my hand long after the call ended. My fingers tingled. My chest ached in a way that felt more like grief than confusion. I started having dreams. Dreams where I was walking through a hallway filled with locked doors, and every door had a nameplate, but none of them had mine. I'd pound on the doors, screaming my name, but no sound came out. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, fingers curled around the edge of my blanket like it was the last thread connecting me to myself. One morning, I went to the bank to make a deposit. I handed the teller my ID, smiled politely. She scanned it, frowned. "This isn't matching our system, ma'am." "What do you mean? The name on your ID doesn't match the one on your account?" I froze. "But this is my name," I said. "This has always been my name." "I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do. You'll have to bring legal documentation showing the name change." I didn't change it. She looked at me like I was confused, like I was old and forgetful, like I didn't know my own story. I left the bank shaking. That was the beginning of the unraveling. One place after another, one door after another. Health office, name mismatch, library card, name mismatch, landlord, new name on the lease. I confronted Daniel again, this time in person. He stood in the doorway of his apartment, arms crossed, expression blank. "You're overreacting," he said. "No, Daniel, I'm not. You're erasing me." He rolled his eyes. "It's just paperwork." "It's my life," I snapped. "My identity. My history." He sighed. "You're undocumented, Mun. Don't you get it? I was trying to protect you. The less noise, the better. You shouldn't even be on file in some of these places." I stepped back. That word, undocumented. The word I fought every day not to wear like a scar. I had lived in this country for 25 years, worked, paid taxes, raised a child, survived, and he was telling me I didn't belong. I walked away from that conversation, not because I was done, but because I couldn't speak. My mouth had gone dry, my body numb. That night, I sat on the floor with every paper I owned spread around me like a broken map, trying to piece together where I went wrong, what I missed, how I didn't see it coming. And somewhere between the expired work permit and the folded envelope with his handwriting on it, I understood. I didn't miss it. I just refused to believe it. Because believing it meant accepting that my son, the one I built my world around, had been slowly erasing me with my help, my trust, my love. I want to ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that you ignored the truth even when it was right in front of you? Have you ever signed something thinking it was love, only to realize it was silence? If you've ever felt betrayed by someone who said they were protecting you, please share your story. Write in the comments, "I trusted them, and they used it against me." Or even just, "This is too familiar." Your words can help someone else wake up before it's too late. And believe me, I wish I had woken up sooner. But what came next was something I never could have imagined. The day I walked into the immigration office was supposed to be routine, just a follow-up. I had a paper notice, crumpled from my handbag, but official. I'd been told I needed to verify some information. That was all. No red flags, no urgency. Just a quiet line on a quiet Tuesday morning. But deep down, my stomach twisted. Not because of the office, not because of the wait, but because something in my spirit had already begun to unravel, and I was trying my best to hold it together with thin threads of denial. They called my name. Well, what used to be my name. And I stepped up to the counter, holding my purse tight like a shield. The woman behind the glass asked me to confirm my identity. I gave her my ID. She looked confused. Then she typed something into her computer. Her eyebrows furrowed. And then she said it. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There's no record under this name." I stared at her. My fingers gripped the edge of the counter. "Excuse me." She turned the monitor slightly. "The system shows no data under this full name. Are you sure this is correct?" That word again. Correct. As if my entire life could be filed as an error. I felt my throat tighten. This has always been my name. Maria Aparecida dos Santos. She paused, then turned to her supervisor. I stood there, frozen, heart racing. Eyes darting to the people in line behind me, who now looked everywhere except at me, like I was a glitch, a delay, an inconvenience in their morning. A man came over, clipboard in hand, professional smile. Not the kind that comforted you, the kind that told you he was about to ruin your life with paperwork and a neutral voice. He looked at the screen, then back at me. "Ma'am, it appears there's been a legal name correction filed recently. It was processed and approved." I blinked. "By who?" He checked the screen again. "It lists your emergency contact, a Mr. Daniel Santos." My breath caught. "No, that can't be right. That's my son." "Yes, he submitted a form requesting that your name be corrected to match official family records. Your file was updated 2 months ago. The old identity has been archived and is no longer active in our system." My knees buckled slightly. I gripped the counter harder to stay upright. The blood drained from my face. Everything around me blurred. I could barely hear him over the pounding in my ears. Archived, like I was a document that expired. I tried to speak, but my voice came out in pieces. "But I didn't authorize that. I didn't know." The man nodded, politely but firmly. "The form included signatures. If there was an error, you'll need to initiate a separate investigation. But until then, your current record reflects the updated name." "What name?" He flipped his clipboard, showed me the new listing. Maria Santos. No middle name, no maternal surname. No trace of the woman who crossed the border carrying a boy on her back. No trace of the girl from Bahia who scrubbed other people's floors. No trace of the mother who spent years whispering her name at night so she wouldn't forget who she was. I didn't cry. Not there. Not yet. Something deeper than tears took over. A numbness. A fog. A kind of heartbreak that doesn't scream. It just sinks. I left the office without asking more questions. I didn't argue. I didn't yell, because there was no one left to listen. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. I walked without direction. I didn't want to go home, not to the apartment that now carried his name on the lease instead of mine, not to the rooms that felt less and less like mine every day. I ended up at the small park near the river, the same one I used to take Daniel to when he was little. He loved to watch the ducks. He'd run in circles until he fell, laughing so loud strangers would stop to smile. I sat on a bench and watched the trees sway, and then I let go. I cried, not like I usually cry, not like the soft tears that come late at night, muffled into a pillow so no one hears. No, this was different. This was guttural, ugly, loud, like my body was trying to empty out all the years I kept everything inside. I cried for every time I stayed silent when I should have asked questions, for every form I signed without reading, for every meal I made for him, every night I waited by the phone, every moment I convinced myself that a little love was better than none. And I cried for the name, for Maria Aparecida dos Santos, the woman who no longer existed in any official document, but who still lived, fully, painfully, deeply, inside my chest. How do you keep living in a country where your own son rewrites your story? How do you trust anyone again when the person you gave everything to used that trust to erase you? I wish I had an answer. All I know is that I sat on that bench for hours, until the sun shifted, until the shadows grew long, until my body stopped shaking, and I promised myself something. I may not be on their records anymore, but I'm still here, and I will not be silent again. I know this part of my story hurts. I know it's heavy, but I also know someone out there is nodding right now. Someone is remembering their own moment, their own erasure. Maybe it wasn't a name. Maybe it was a voice, a dream, a life. If that's you, please, speak. Drop a comment, even if it's just the words, "I still exist," or if you've felt this kind of betrayal, this kind of silence, right? They took my name, but not my truth. Let's remind each other that we are not invisible. Because what I found out next, it would shatter whatever was left of me. It was a Friday morning when they knocked on my door. I remember the sound. It wasn't urgent, but it wasn't casual either. 3 knocks, firm, final, like they already knew I was inside, and like it wouldn't matter if I didn't answer. I froze. My heart didn't beat. It pulsed like a warning siren deep in my ribs. I peeked through the peephole and saw 2 men in plain clothes. One held a file folder. The other had a badge. Not local police. Not delivery. My blood turned cold. Immigration. I opened the door because I had nothing to hide. Because I believed, even after everything, that this country, that my own child, wouldn't let it come to this. But they knew my name, or at least the one that was left. Maria Santos? I nodded, my voice stuck in my throat. We need to speak with you regarding some inconsistencies in your file. I let them in. I made coffee, because that's what I do when I'm scared. I become polite. I become small. I become the version of myself they expect. Cooperative, grateful, silent. They didn't drink the coffee. They opened the folder and laid out documents I had never seen before. Affidavits, a notarized declaration, a new immigration case file, an application for review of resident status, flagged for fraudulent information. I blinked. What is this? One of them spoke gently, like he was reading from a script. According to our records, your previous name is no longer valid. Your updated file lacks supporting documents that verify your lawful presence. Your prior entries were tied to a different identity. At this time, we need to verify your current legal status. I've been here for over 20 years, I whispered. They didn't blink. I pay taxes. I work. My son, he's a citizen. They looked at each other. Your son is listed here as the party who initiated the update to your status. Silence. I didn't understand. I initiated? The man nodded. The paperwork came through a request to streamline your documentation for elder care. It was part of a bundled submission tied to financial guardianship, but due to the conflicting records, it triggered a full case review. Case review? It means, the other one said quietly, that your presence here is now being evaluated. My mouth went dry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the folder in half. I wanted to call Daniel and demand answers, but I couldn't move. My hands trembled. My heart ached in a way that felt physical, like something inside me was tearing. They told me I had 30 days to produce proof. Proof of what? That I existed? That I had been a mother? That I had sacrificed? They left, and I sat on my kitchen floor, surrounded by coffee that had gone cold and papers that felt like weapons. I picked up one of the forms and saw his signature, Daniel Santos. I stared at the loops of his handwriting, at the careful strokes. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a typo. This wasn't something he did without knowing. This was planned, intentional, clean. He had filed to become my legal guardian 2 years earlier, said it was to help me with bills. I'd signed those papers too, trusted him, believed he was looking out for me. But hidden in the fine print was more than just assistance. He had control over my information, my health care, my documentation, and now my identity. He had cleaned up my file by cleaning me out of it. In the system, I was now a dependent with no verified origin. My prior documents tied to the name Aparecida were marked as invalid. My birth certificate, foreign and unlinked. My social security, never matched to a valid visa. My driver's ID, expired and now considered issued under an incorrect identity. I had become a ghost, legally erased, and the son I once fed with trembling hands had placed the final signature. That night, I called him. He answered, surprisingly calm, too calm. "I had a visit today," I said. Pause. "Yeah, I figured you might. You did this?" He sighed. "It wasn't like that, mine. I needed to protect myself. There were liabilities." "Liabilities? I'm applying for a government job. I can't have any red flags on my record. Having someone undocumented listed at my address, I couldn't breathe. It could have affected my background check." I sat in silence, the phone trembling in my hand. "You're my mother," I whispered. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't think they'd come after you. I just cleaned the files. I didn't mean to hurt you. Didn't mean to. Like my life was a typo. Like my name was clutter. Like I was a loose thread in the fabric of the life he was stitching for himself." He hung up before I could say anything else, and for a long time, I just sat there. I stared at the wall, and I realized something I'd tried so hard to deny. He was never coming back. Not really. Not the boy who once pressed his ear to my belly to hear his own heartbeat. Not the little boy who kissed my hands after I cleaned his cuts. Not the son who once told me, "When I'm rich, I'll buy you a house with a garden, mon." That boy was gone, and the man who replaced him had rewritten the story of his life and removed me from it entirely. I don't know if any of you watching right now have ever felt this deep, bone-breaking kind of betrayal. The kind that doesn't come from enemies, but from blood, from the people you raised, from the ones you bled for. If you've ever been erased, overlooked, or quietly cut out of someone's life, please, don't carry that silence alone. Write in the comments, "They erased me, but I remember who I am." Or even simpler, "I know this pain." Your voice matters. Your memory matters. And if no one else sees you, I do. And I'm not done telling you what happened. Not even close. The night after Daniel hung up on me, I didn't sleep. I didn't cook. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark with the folder still open on my lap, reading the same lines over and over, hoping the words would change, hoping my name would magically reappear, that someone would call and say, "There's been a mistake. You belong here. You matter." But the phone stayed silent, and so did the world around me. I had never felt that kind of loneliness before. It wasn't just isolation, it was annihilation. Like someone had peeled off my skin and left me raw and unrecognizable in a place I once called home. A place I had cleaned, cooked in, loved in. A place where I had memorized the streets, the bus lines, the smell of every grocery store aisle. A place where I raised a child. Now I couldn't even prove I existed here. I tried to fix it. The next morning, I went to the local community center where I knew a woman named Reina used to help undocumented workers with paperwork. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Not since I helped clean her aunt's apartment after she passed. But when she saw me, she smiled. That smile cracked something in me. I almost cried right there. She led me to a small office in the back and asked what happened. I couldn't speak at first. I just handed her the folder. She flipped through it silently, her brows furrowing deeper with every page. When she finally looked up, her eyes were gentle, but honest. "Maria, this is bad." I nodded, swallowing hard. "They've tied your previous identity to a flagged case. Anything connected to Aparecida has been archived as an alias, which means your work history, your benefits, your residency, everything is now floating, disconnected." I sat perfectly still. "And because your son filed these updates under legal guardianship, it's complicated. You signed over certain rights. Technically, he didn't act illegally, just selfishly. Selfishly. That word didn't even begin to cover it. I asked her what I could do. She said I could try to reclaim my name through an identity appeal process, but it would take months, possibly years. It would involve legal support, affidavits, witnesses, certified documents from Brazil, translated and notarized. Thousands of dollars I didn't have. And worse, until then, I would have no access to public services, no renewal of my ID, no reapplication for residency, nothing official. I was in limbo. You're stateless, she said. Here, but nowhere. That word, stateless, it rang in my ears like a verdict, like a sentence. I thanked her, hugged her too long, left with a manila envelope full of printed forms and a new kind of weight in my chest. When I got home, the apartment felt colder than usual, smaller. Even my favorite chair, the one I bought secondhand but reupholstered myself, felt foreign. My home didn't feel like home. It felt like someone else's life, a life I had been borrowing, a life that no longer belonged to me. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the empty wall where Daniel's baby pictures used to be. I had taken them down a few months ago after our last fight. At the time, I told myself I just needed to clean the space. But now I knew the truth. I couldn't look at them anymore. Couldn't see that little boy and pretend he still lived somewhere inside the man who had done this to me. I remember once, when Daniel was 9, he came home from school in tears. Some kids had made fun of his accent. He still rolled his R's and mispronounced a few words. I held him in my arms, rocked him gently and whispered, "They don't know who you are, but you do, and that's what matters." Now I had no idea who he was. And worse, I wasn't sure he knew who I was anymore either. I looked at my hands, the same hands that held him through fever. That folded his clothes. That wiped his tears. Now they shook with age and grief. I tried to find distractions. I went back to cleaning houses, though fewer clients were calling now. I worked under the table. No records, no checks, no receipts. Just cash slipped into envelopes and silent nods of thanks. I smiled when I was spoken to, laughed when the women said, "You do it so much better than the others." I scrubbed toilets while biting the inside of my cheek so I wouldn't cry. I needed to feel useful, needed to feel real. But every time I opened a form, a drawer full of bills with someone else's name at the top, the reminder came crashing down. I didn't exist anymore. Daniel didn't call, not even to check in, not to ask if I was okay, not to explain or apologize or pretend. He had moved on. He had built a clean, American life. And I was too messy, too inconvenient to fit into that picture. But I couldn't stop wondering. Was there ever a version of our story where I mattered to him? Was there a moment, maybe when he was small, when he kissed my cheek without reason, when he waited for me to come home from work and ran to hug me at the door, when he meant it? Or was I always a stepping stone, just a bridge he needed to cross, a vessel, a passport into a better life? If you've ever felt like that, like your love was used as a ladder for someone else to climb while you were left behind, I hope you'll tell me. Leave a comment, even if it's just the words, "They left me behind." Or if you've ever had to rebuild your identity from ashes, just write, "I am still me." Because I see you, I feel you. And what happened next? It would test me in ways I wasn't prepared for. But I kept going. Not because I was strong, but because survival was the only thing I had left. It's strange, the things you begin to notice when you stop being someone. Time slows down. Sounds change. Even your reflection starts to feel like a stranger's. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and staring at the ceiling, waiting for something to happen. A knock, a call, a scream, anything. But the silence stretched out like a punishment. And in that silence, I forgot who I was supposed to be. I stopped cooking. I stopped calling anyone. The women I used to work with sent messages, Raina included. But I didn't answer. What would I even say? That my own son had rewritten me out of my life? That I was now a shadow, walking through a country I no longer belonged to? The shame was too thick, too sticky. It clung to me like sweat I couldn't wash off. The apartment stayed dark most days. I kept the curtains closed. The sunlight made things too real, too sharp. I'd wander from room to room in silence, sometimes forgetting what I had gone in there to do. Once, I stared at the wall for almost an hour, trying to remember if I had eaten. I hadn't. I dropped weight. Not enough for others to notice, but enough for my clothes to hang differently. My face looked hollow. I avoided mirrors. There's something terrifying about becoming invisible. At first, it's metaphorical, just a feeling, a sense that you're being overlooked, unseen. But then it becomes real, tangible. Systems don't recognize you. Phones stop ringing. Your name isn't on envelopes. Your son deletes you from the emergency contact list. And then, the worst part, you start to agree with it. You begin to believe the silence is deserved. I tried to pray, but even God felt far away. I lit the old candle I had tucked away in the kitchen drawer, the one I used to burn on feast days. I knelt on the floor and whispered words from memory. Hail Marys, Father our. Aparecida mia santa, mia guia. But the words felt empty. I didn't feel worthy of answers. How do you pray when you've forgotten the sound of your own voice? Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope, no return address. Folded twice. No salutation, no signature. Just 2 sentences printed in plain black ink. You are no longer protected under this address. Your association has been removed. I read it 3 times before I realized what it meant. Daniel had officially removed me from his housing file, from his records, from everything. Whatever thin string still tied me to his world, he had cut it, quietly, permanently. It was the final nail in a coffin I hadn't agreed to lie in. I held the letter in my hands for what felt like hours. I tried to cry, but no tears came. My body didn't react the way I expected. Instead, a dull hum filled my ears. My heart thudded slowly. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope, set it on the counter. Then I went to the sink and washed the same dish 3 times. It was like that for days, until something broke. I was walking to the corner store one afternoon, hunched over in my coat, scarf wrapped around my face like armor, when I heard someone call my name, my full name. Aparecida? I froze. No one had called me that in years. I turned and saw an old friend, Lucia, from back when we cleaned offices together. Her eyes lit up with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Recognition, not pity, not confusion. She knew me. She ran up and hugged me tight, asked where I'd been, said she had tried to reach me. I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. She looked at me, really looked at me. "You don't look well," she said softly. "Come with me. Come home." I went. We walked to her apartment. She made tea. She didn't ask questions. She didn't demand explanations. She just sat with me in silence. And somehow, that silence didn't hurt. It felt warm, familiar. When I finally told her what happened, everything, from the paperwork to the name change to the visit from immigration, she didn't gasp. She didn't say, "I'm so sorry." She just nodded and said, "He forgot where he came from." We sat there for hours, talking, and for the first time in weeks, I laughed. Just once, just a breath, but it felt like a seed. Before I left, she pressed a small notebook into my hand. "Write," she said. "You don't have to show anyone, just write." That night, I did. I opened to the first page, held the pen, and stared. Then I wrote my full name at the top, Maria Aparecida dos Santos. The letters looked shaky, uneven, but they were mine. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I saw myself again. Not on paper, not in government files, but here, in my own hand. That page became 2, then 5, then 10. I wrote every night, wrote about Daniel, about my mother, about Brazil, about the river where I first swam, the mango trees, the songs I used to sing, the way my son used to hold my finger like it was the only thing anchoring him to the world. The more I wrote, the more I remembered who I was before he tried to erase me. I was not paperwork. I was not an error. I was not just his mother. I was a woman, a survivor, a person with a name that meant something, even if only to me. And that realization, it didn't fix everything, but it started something. And sometimes, that's all you need. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself piece by piece? Have you ever had to write your name just to remember you still exist? If this speaks to you, even a little, drop a comment. I am rebuilding. Or if you've had to fight for your identity, share this. I refuse to disappear because your name matters. Your story matters. And the next part of mine is just beginning. I began to speak again, not to many people, not loudly, but in small moments that mattered. At the pharmacy, I said my name clearly, even when the woman behind the counter raised an eyebrow. When she asked for my ID and I gave her the one with the wrong name, I didn't apologize. I just said, "That's not who I am anymore." She looked confused, maybe a little concerned, but I didn't flinch. I didn't shrink. Because every time I said my name, my real name, it was like breathing life back into myself. Maria Aparecida dos Santos. Each syllable was a rebellion, a refusal, a declaration. I went back to Reina and asked her to help me file the first appeal. We sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by papers, highlighters, sticky notes, and tea. She walked me through every step like a teacher guiding a scared student, and for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid to ask questions. What does this line mean? Why do I need this notarized? Will this be enough? Her answers weren't always comforting. She told me the truth, that the system was slow, unforgiving, and often cruel, that there were no guarantees, that sometimes even the best efforts were met with silence. But she also told me that my voice still mattered, that I still had rights, that being undocumented, erased, or rewritten didn't mean I had to stay silent. And hearing that, from someone who had fought battles like mine, gave me something more powerful than comfort. It gave me permission to fight back, permission to feel anger without guilt, permission to exist. Every day, I filled out a form, made a phone call, or wrote something in my notebook. Some days it felt like nothing, others like I was moving mountains. I started to collect everything: copies of my rent payments, old utility bills, tax forms, letters from clients who remembered me, photos of Daniel and I from when he was little, smiling in front of the Statue of Liberty. Proof, not just of my presence, but of my motherhood, my sacrifice, my life. I even wrote a statement by hand, in Portuguese and English. I titled it simply, "I am still here." I kept it folded in my wallet, not for them, but for me. There were nights when the fear came back, strong, paralyzing. The fear that none of it would work, that I'd be deported, that I'd disappear in a detention center, that I'd become another faceless story whispered about in kitchens like mine. But I held on to something stronger than fear: stubbornness. It sounds simple, almost silly, but that was my weapon. The same stubbornness that once got me through the border with a baby on my hip. The same stubbornness that made me work double shifts even when my legs screamed. The same stubbornness that raised a boy alone in a land that didn't want me. I wasn't going to let the system, or my son, strip that away. And slowly, I started to rebuild. One of my old clients, Mrs. Klein, called me out of the blue, said she heard I wasn't working anymore and asked if I could come back, just once, to clean her guest room. "No one scrubs like you, Maria," she said with a laugh. I hesitated, but I said yes. When I arrived, she hugged me like a daughter. And when I was done, she sat me down and asked if I was okay. Not in the polite way people do when they don't really want the answer. She meant it. I told her some of it, not all, but enough. She cried. And then she did something I never expected. She wrote me a letter. A formal, signed letter affirming that I had worked for her family for over a decade, that I had helped raise her grandchildren, that I had shown up, rain or shine, with care and kindness and integrity. She called it a character reference. I called it a lifeline. I added it to my folder. Every piece helped. A puzzle of proof, a map back to myself, and something else began to happen. People, women mostly, started reaching out. Word spread, quietly, respectfully. Women who had their names taken by abusive husbands. Mothers whose kids stopped calling once they got citizenship. Sisters erased from family histories because they were inconvenient, undocumented, different. They found me. Through Reina, through Lucia, through whispers in waiting rooms and laundromats. And suddenly, I wasn't alone. We met at Reina's house every Sunday, shared food, shared stories, shared names, real names. We held each other's hands and said them out loud, like incantations. Juana, Maricela, Zara, Aparecida. Each name, a resistance. Each woman, a miracle. We laughed. We cried. We helped each other fill out forms and decode legal letters. We prayed together, ate together, lived together, in defiance of the silence that tried to consume us. I hadn't known I needed them, but they saved me, not by fixing anything, but by seeing me, by reminding me that even if the world forgot my name, these women would whisper it back to me until I remembered. That's the power of community. That's the power of women who refuse to disappear. If you're watching this and you've ever felt erased, silenced, or made small, this part is for you. Say your name, out loud, right now. And if you want to share it with us, drop it in the comments with these words. My name is mine. Or if you've been through something like this, write, I was almost erased, but I came back. Because you matter. Your name matters. And I'm not done telling you what happened next, because what came after this changed everything. The letter came on a Wednesday, not a phone call, not an email. A physical letter, folded carefully, slipped into my mailbox like it wasn't carrying the weight of my entire world. I held it for hours before I opened it. My hands trembled so badly I had to sit down at the kitchen table. I ran my fingers along the edge of the envelope over and over, trying to convince myself I was ready, whatever it said. Then I opened it. Ms. Maria Aparecida dos Santos. Following a comprehensive case review and identity verification process, we are pleased to inform you. I stopped reading. My breath caught in my throat, and then it fell out of my mouth, all at once, like a wave breaking through the wall I'd built to survive. I cried, big, ugly, grateful sobs. Alone in my kitchen, I dropped to my knees and thanked God, thanked the ancestors, thanked the women who whispered my name when the world tried to silence it. Thanked the part of me that didn't let go. I was back, not just in the system, not just on paper, but in my body, in my spirit, in the story that belonged to me again. That night, I lit every candle I owned, opened every curtain, cooked enough food for 10 people, played music too loud. I danced barefoot in my kitchen like the girl I used to be before borders, before betrayal, before silence. Because that's what freedom felt like. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't fix the relationship with Daniel. It didn't give back the years I lost in limbo. But it gave me something more sacred. Dignity, truth, and a beginning. Daniel never called. I don't know if he ever will. But I no longer wait for that call. I no longer hope for an apology that may never come. Because now, when I speak my name, it echoes with strength, not longing. Now, when I walk down the street, I stand taller, not smaller. Now, when I fill out forms or answer questions, I don't hesitate. I don't flinch. I say it proudly. Maria Aparecida dos Santos. Mother, immigrant, survivor, woman. I am not erased. I never was. And to those of you who stayed through every part of this story, who walked with me through the darkness, who cried with me in silence, who whispered my name back to me when I almost forgot it, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. You didn't just listen, you witnessed. And that's what we all need, isn't it? Not just to be heard, but to be seen. If this story touched you, if you saw a piece of yourself or someone you love in these words, please share this video. Not for me, but for the others out there still waiting to be seen. And if you're still holding back your voice, maybe today is the day you let it rise. Drop a comment below, even if it's just, I am still here. Because yes, you are. Now, if you want to hear another story, one that will move you just as deeply, click on the video that's about to appear on your screen. Trust me, it's one you won't want to miss. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying. And thank you for reminding me that stories, when told from the heart, can heal what silence tried to break. Until next time.